Well, it is November the 13th, 2023. We're doing Parshat Toldot. And we are going to take the first few verses in the Parsha and do an exercise in close reading. That's kind of what we do. We like to read the story with a real magnifying glass, high-powered lens to see what it's saying, how it's saying it, what it's not saying, how what it's saying is connected to other things that it is saying, and if it's possible to interpret and to create a richer story based on that. And my presumption is that the Torah is highly edited, as we were just talking. It's got to compress a lot of the details, and in the way that it presents these details, it's telling us quite a lot. Let's just go right into it, and we'll give our text a chance. This is the beginning of Parshat Toldot. So it's going to do, it's Ve'ele Toldot Yitzchak ben Avraham. Avraham holidet Yitzchak. Pay attention to the way that the verse is formulated. We're going to read it now in English, and using the Everett Fox translation, because he really adheres very close to the cadence of the Hebrew language. Now, these are the begettings of Yitzchak, son of Avram. Begettings are Toldot, Yitzchak, son of Avraham. Avraham begot Yitzchak. Yitzchak was 40 years old when he took Rivka, the daughter of Betuel, the Aramean, from the country of Aram, the sister of Lavan the Aramean, for himself as a wife. Yitzchak entreated God on behalf of his wife, for she was barren, and God granted his entreaty. Rivka, his wife, became pregnant. But the children almost crushed one another inside her. So she said, "If so, why do I exist?" She went to inquire of God. God said to her, 2 nations are in your belly, 2 tribes from your body shall be divided. Tribe shall be mightier than tribe, elder shall be servant to younger. Her days were fulfilled for bearing, and here twins were in her body. The first one came out ruddy, like a hairy mantle all over. So they called his name Esav, rough one. After that, his brother came out, his hand grasping Esav's heel. So they called his name Yaakov, heel holder. Now Yitzchak was 60 years old when she bore them. The lads grew up. Esav became a man knowing the hunt, a man of the open field, while Yaakov was a plain man staying among the tents. Yitzchak grew to love Esav, for he brought hunted game for his mouth, but Rivka loved Yaakov. Okay,
that's the big mistake.
You think so? All right. So you can see, even as I'm reading it, the intention of reading it that way, and intention of putting it in front of you on the screen in basically in 2-word units, is to elicit your curiosity about every single item here. I'll just do that quickly again, just so that you get the experience here, and I would say there's quite a difference in the way that we study this and in the way we chant it and read it. Chanting this takes 1/10 of the time that I just spent in reading it. We're finished that in 30 seconds. Ve'ele Toldot Yitzchak ben Avraham, Avraham holidet Yitzchak. Right, and so, as I say, reading it, seeing it, the text in front of you, but also hearing it elicits the questions, and the questions, well, we'll go straight into them. I'm just gonna let you see this again, so that you have the text in front of you, Yitzchak was 40 years old when he took Rivka, the daughter of Betuel, the Aramean. Yitzchak entreated God on behalf of his wife. The children crushed another inside her. She went to inquire. God said to her, 2 nations are in your belly. Her days were fulfilled for bearing. There were twins. The first came out ruddy. After that, the brother came out, his hand grasping Esav's heel. The lads grew up. Esav became a man knowing the hunt. Yaakov, a plain man. Yitzchak grew to love Esav. Rivka loved Yaakov. Okay, so now, here's our close reading. This expression, Ve'ela Toldot, these are the beginnings. Well, we don't want to isolate this from the surrounding text. We do have many, many different times in the book of Genesis in particular, but it's throughout the Bible, where you have this formula, Ve'ela Toldot. In fact, just a few verses before this, you were getting the generations, or the Toldot, the begettings of Ishmael. So Ve'ela Toldot. You don't have to pay attention to the fact that one is written with a vav and one is without a vav here. It's not the main point. It's the same phrase. Yishmael ben Avraham, Yitzchak ben Avraham. We had this just before what we're getting in our Parsha. And then it says, Asher Yalda Hagar HaMitzrit Shivchat Sarah Avraham, which is, these are the beginnings of Ishmael, son of Abraham, whom Hagar, the Egyptian woman, Sarah's maid, bore to Abraham. So reading that or listening to that, you're reminded that Ishmael is the son of Hagar. But when the text here says, Eila Toldot Yitzchak ben Avraham, well, Yitzchak and Ishmael are both the same of son of Abraham, but Avraham holided Yitzchak. Abraham begot Isaac, but didn't Abraham beget Ishmael too? Of course he begot Ishmael, but there's a difference. What's the difference? The difference is that Abraham begot Isaac with Sarah, and Abraham begot Ishmael with Hagar. So then, why wouldn't the text say Avraham v'Sarah holidu et Yitzchak? That would be a great question for you, John. Which is, why is Sarah dissed here? Why is Sarah not in the picture here? And I don't have a good answer. I'm sorry. I don't have a good answer for that. I'll have to look one up. My point is, though, that the best I can do here is that it's leaving out Sarah precisely because it wants to focus on the lineage of Abraham and Isaac. And it's basically saying that it's cueing the listener reader here that the story is now progressing through Isaac. And it's Abraham's story. Abraham is the primary character. Lech Lecha is to Abraham, not to Sarah. Lech Lecha is Abraham. Of course, he wouldn't have been able to produce Yitzchak without Sarah. But what it's saying here is the line of descendants is to from Abraham directly. Okay, and here, because it's telling you that it went through Hagar, it's saying she's off to the side, they're off to the side. We're now focusing longitudinally now and not tangentially. That's basically what's going on here. It's a straight shot now from Abraham to Isaac, whereas Ishmael is a tangent. Okay. So Ishmael reference to the mother, Isaac reference to the father, Hagar is a handmaid, Sarah not mentioned. The line of the inheritance is from Abraham to Isaac because Ishmael was born to her. Now here we get another close reading. Okay. Vayihi Yitzchak ben 40 shana bekachto et Rivka ba'Betuel. So we get a piece of information that Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rivka, the daughter of Betuel, ha'arami, mipadan Aram, achot Lavan ha'arami, lo lisha. So she's the daughter of Betuel the Aramean from the country of Aram, the sister of Lavan the Aramean for himself. That was why I should have put yellow highlighting on Aramean, etc. Okay, so I'm going to ask you, what's going on here? Why do we have to know she's the daughter of the Betuel the Aramean? She's from the country of Aram, and she's the sister of Lavan the Aramean. What's that about? Anybody want to try and give an answer to that? No? All right. Well, that's why I wrote the answers.
Does Nahor and then be the father of Abraham and Yitzchak and the brother Lavan? They would all be the same tribe. He sent Eliezer back to his hometown.
That's correct, and it's precisely to make you explore the genealogy. So what you're doing basically is saying, okay, well let me kind of rewind here and ask myself, well, what's the relationship? So we'll drill it into everybody. Who are the three sons of Terach? The three sons of Terach are Abraham, Haran, Nahor, and Haran. Okay, Haran is the youngest brother. Nahor is the second brother. Haran dies, which I always say is the most overlooked item in the whole Torah. Right, the fact that Terach loses a son shifts the whole story in ways that are not predictable. However, there are two principles left over: Avram and Nahor. Avram makes the migration to Canaan. Nahor stays back there. Okay, and Nahor, if you read carefully at the end of chapter 22 of the book of Genesis, Nahor basically becomes a father of his own dynasty, his own people, and he inhabits that place in Aram. So this telegraphs to us that a reminder of there's a family there, and the family is basically a branch of Abraham's family, or really more precisely, it's a branch of the Terachite family. It's Abraham's brother. That's what's there. Nanette, you have a question?
So, in addition to answering your question about, why do we need this information, in the previous parsha, Sarah, it specifically says, and this is like the first time in the parshas, that Abraham made the slave promise or swear that he should only find a bride for Rebecca from the tribe. So this is telling us, the reader, that this is the situation from within the tribe.
That's right. That it's being fulfilled. So it's telling us this, and it's and that's a good way to go into some of the following things. We learned, of course, I'll go back to the 40-year-old part in a second. Why three times Aram, Rebecca, daughter of Aaron? So yeah, Rashi gives us I'll give you, there's the literary answer, which I kind of did, which is that it takes us back a little bit and reminds us some geography and some genealogy, and it does basically what Nanette said, which is it is a reminder of this contrast between Canaanite women and ethnic women of your own family, but Rashi makes a nice little thing here, and of course it's Rashi, so we have to give it a little attention. Has it not already been written that she was the daughter of Bethuel, the sister of Laban, Padan Aram? But we are told these facts once more to proclaim her praise. Okay, Elala Git Shivcha, right? And here, we're so proud of Rebecca. Shaita bat Rasha, vachot Rasha. She was the daughter of an evil person. She was the sister of an evil person. Umukoma in Anshe Rasha. She was the daughter of a wicked man, sister of a wicked man, and her native place was one of wicked people, and yet she did not learn from their doings. And so I mentioned that here, I quote that here, because it's something that shapes the way we see her. That in a way, the rabbis and what Rashi is doing is basically condensing a whole midrashic tradition here, saying that there's a righteousness to her. There's a righteousness to her based on her oppositional defiance of a surrounding culture. And that, of course, sounds a lot like Abraham. Abraham is in defiance of the culture around her, and him and Rebecca is defiant of the culture around him, at least according into the rabbinic imagination. It's very harsh on her family and the surroundings. I would say the only one who's deserving of the term Rasha, is Lavan. Lavan is the real conniving one. Bethuel to be charitable to her father, he seemed like a nice guy. He seemed like a decent fellow. In fact, what we studied last week was that he honored his commitment to the pledge to have Rebecca go and be married, and it was only Lavan and his wife, Rebecca's mother and brother, who started arguing and started bargaining. I said last week that made them look really, really ugly, as opposed to Betuel, the father, who made a commitment and stood by his commitment and was not part of the discussion. So I would, not to debate Rashi here, but Rashi is doing something for the sake of trying to explicate a contrast, religious and theological and spiritual contrast between the ancestors and their surroundings, and we don't blame him for that. And I think hovering in the background, certainly with the rabbis and certainly with Rashi, is there are all sorts of coded ways to speak to your own surroundings. Okay, we do this ourselves today. We have a certain coded language when we speak of Gentiles or non-Jews or whatever, and we'll make our own derogatory private comments within the code of our own ethnic cultures. It's not inescapable, right? I'll give you just a funny one, which is the comedian Modi, who we like to listen to from time to time. He starts his podcast off and he says, "This is my podcast is sponsored by A&H Provisions. They make the best hot dogs ever. Even goyim like them." Right? So that's
You don't have to be Jewish to like Levi.
Well, that's it. I mean, it's how can someone be offended by that? What's behind the humor? Behind the humor is that a Jewish hot dog. What is a Jewish hot dog? And for a non-Jew to like a hot dog, it has to really, really taste them. So they're so tasty that even non-Jews. I mean, that's kind of silly, but you get the point. The point is that we speak in this way, in our own culture, based on the way we code our relationship to outside cultures. Look, I mean, I'll quote my late grandfather. My mother's here, so my late grandfather would say that the whole world hates Jews. That there were Jews and anti-Semites. That's the world, okay? And you know what? I'm sorry. Of course, it's an exaggeration and a caricature, but in a moment, where we have this convulsion of anti-Semitism, the world is black and white. There are those who like Jews and those who hate Jews. That's it. There's no real gray area, and that can come out in sometimes very blunt ways, as opposed to very nuanced ways. So I would say here, Rashi is being very nuanced because he's speaking to his own. He's channeling the Midrash, but he may be making a veiled reference to those outside of him, as he probably does from time to time. Okay. But go ahead.
Rabbi?
Yes, go ahead. A lot of them.
Why does Rashi assume that the repetition is praise? Why couldn't it be anything else?
Can I say something about
Go
the
ahead.
repetition?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I think the repetition is meant to justify Rebecca's behavior later on when she switches the sons, to protect her ahead of time. Like, she came from wicked family, but she is not. But later on, what she did, not everybody agrees that it was the right thing to do.
So you might see that as a sign of her. There's a little bit of conniving in her, also a little bit of mischief in her. Okay. And Marlene, your question again was why do you assume that because Rasha is repeated that it's praise as opposed to anything else? the Aram is repeated, that it's
Rasha.
Rasha. Well, in the verse, it's Aram is repeated, the repeated term, and so I'll just move to this way, which is there's another way of looking at it. It's not that she comes from a bad background; it's that she's not a Canaanite. Okay, so when the text says to you 3 times that she's an Aramean, if you're a rabbi, you want to make a sermon, you're going to say she comes from over there where they're all anti-Semites, right? Or, but instead what you're saying, what they're saying is she's not from here, okay? She's not a local. She's from there means she comes from there and she's different, or she's from there and not from here, okay? Do you get the difference? Coming from there is 2 valences, 2 little, variables. Coming from there means you're not like them, and coming from there means you're not like us. And that's perfect. I could easily hold on to both positions, which is that she's differentiated from her own background, and she's differentiated from the women of Canaan, right? And both of those speak to not only to ethnic characteristics, or ethnic origins, but I think they're also speaking to the ethical or the moral or character traits, that there are certain stereotypes that are just assumed from Canaanites, that and which is why there's such a revulsion or taboo against marrying Canaanites, notwithstanding the fact that in 2 generations, Jacob's sons were all basically married Canaanites. But there are certain stereotypes against them, and she obviously is not one of those people. And then there are certain stereotypes of Arameans, and because she immigrates to Abraham's family to marry Isaac, she no longer possesses those ethnic traits. Okay, she's neither here nor there. Nicht dahin, nicht there. Okay, what does it mean literarily? Well, easily, it's a foreshadowing. Okay, I think you got that also, which is that Aram is going to figure prominently in the story because Jacob is going to go back there. Right. So we have read the story dozens of times, so we know how it ends, which is, I think, one of the interesting strategies in reading the Bible is that you kind of you have all the spoilers. That the sons are going to end up, or Jacob is going to end back up there, and that there's going to be a significant tale told back in that place, including the principal character, not as much Betuel. I don't think he is in the scene as much, but it's certainly Lavan. Jacob will go back and encounter his uncle. Yaakov's return to Haran is not only a consequence of the theft of the blessing, but it is built into the story from the very beginning. So this is another, and I took this out of Jonathan Grossman. He was basically saying, look, we tend to think of the story that because he steals the birthright later on, that's why he has to run away. But the story already gave us a clue as to what's going to happen by mentioning this 3 times. 1 second, Lana. And we're reminded of the branch of the family precisely because it's going to figure in the future. The story, so the basic arc of the Yaakov story is his prelude to escape, which is the verses that I'm looking at, the stealing of the blessing and the stealing of the birthright and the blessing, his marriages and family building, that's the second part, which is not this week's Parsha, his return to Hebron, which is the following week's Parsha. And Alana, go ahead.
Why did Jacob have to get the blessing if already Rebecca was told when she was pregnant that the younger one will be the stronger son? V'rav yavot
Seir.
Yeah, but
Right.
it was already Jacob was already blessed in a way.
So the answer to that is not necessarily. He did not receive the blessing, and she saw that it was going to go the other way. And while I don't have the text in front of us here, it's, if you recall, at the scene is that when Isaac says to Esav, go out and hunt me some venison, hunt me some food, so that I will bless you, right? And she overhears that and says, interesting. He thinks that he's going to pass away soon, and so he thinks he now needs to give a blessing. And because she has that information now, she says this conflicts with the oracle that she received, and so therefore I have to correct this. That's what she's doing. She, in setting Jacob up for the blessing, she wants to correct the situation in light of the oracle. Now, one way of understanding the oracle, which I don't have up in front of us, is it's also ambiguous. It says V'rav Yavod Sa'ir, so that could mean the Rav, the elder will serve the younger. The Rav Yavod Sa'ir, the younger will serve the elder. So it depends where you put the stress in the sentence to understand it. And that's precisely what an oracle does. An oracle always leaves you with a lot of ambiguity, because it can go one way or another. That's what it is. Okay. So now back to the first verse. Ve'ela Toldot Yitzchak ben Avraham, Avraham olidet Yitzchak. These are the beginnings. What do we expect to read after this, right? Once it says Ve'ela Toldot Yitzchak ben Avraham, these are the beginnings. What are we expecting? We're expecting the beginnings. We're expecting to get a whole list like we got with Ishmael. Ve'ela Shmot Yishmael b'shmotam l'toldotam, and they give a whole list of people, but we don't get this at all. Instead, what we get is just a report of his age. He's 40 years old. I mentioned that 40, takes you into a certain calculation. The calculation is that Sarah dies at 127. Sarah had Isaac at 90. Therefore, Isaac was 37 when Sarah died. And if Isaac married Rebekah at 40, there were 3 years that transpired between the death of Sarah and the marriage of Rebekah, 3 years in which he basically had to fix his life. And I made that point in my sermon on Shabbat that we don't have, the Jewish tradition gives us a whole calendar for how to mourn, but not everyone mourns on the same calendar. And often, people take quite a long time to recover from crisis or trauma. What I didn't mention, I should have used this as an example, was our fire. The fire happened in the shul in 2006, and the dedication of the new shul was 2009. Okay, so it took 3 years for there to be a recovery. Okay, a full recovery. That is to say, for us to use a building, and that's a building. All right. Now, people, we've known people to, after they suffer a bereavement, we have a whole, a range of people's behaviors where they'll go right into relationships if they lose a spouse, or they'll take a lot of time, or they'll, in the case of a loss of a parent, it'll take them a long time to recover from a bereavement, a loss, or some kind of trauma. And how long does it take? That's a very good question. I reckon that 3 years is a respectable amount of time to recover from the trauma of a loss. To some, it may be a little longer. To some, it may be a little shorter. But for some, it might be just right. Okay. Then Yitzchak entreated God on behalf of his wife. She was barren, and God granted his entreaty. Rivka, his wife, became pregnant. So we have to read this detail by detail. that he prays on her behalf, vayetar, entreated. And vayetar is not vayit palel. It's a different kind of word, and I'm not sure we really understand what this word means. That there's something going on there, that there's a yearning, and it almost lines up with the picture of Yitzchak as the more spiritual of the patriarchs. That if you want to say, unlike Gary Rensburg, that when Isaac was wandering in the field, he was actually meditating, which many, the whole tradition says, and he's an outlier on that. He says that he was just, tending to his own needs, But if you were to say that Isaac is a little more spiritual, then the fact that he's, the character is devoted to this kind of activity shouldn't be surprising to us. And he's praying for her. And then we get the information as to why he's praying for her, because she is barren. And God granted his entreaty, nice play on words, vaye'ater, as opposed to vayetar, vaye'ater, vatar Rivka ishto. What this verse doesn't tell you then is one piece of information, which is, well, when did he pray for her? And what happened? The next verse tells us that he was 60 when she gave birth. So your midrash on the prayer would be what? If he's 40 when he gets married and 60 when he has a child, when does the prayer take place for the child? When would he? Okay, so I'll for the sake of Zoom and the clock, when would he have noticed that she is unable to have a child?
Right away.
Right away, right? Because in those days, you got married and you got pregnant. After all, Ishmael, seemed to have no problem. And later on, we're going to see that Leah has no problem, having children. The only person that has a problem is Rachel has a problem. Sarah has a problem, of course. But other biblical characters, women don't seem to have problems. They don't focus on the possibility that it may be the man's infertility here. And I think that that's, a very important problem. In fact, one commentator that I've read, I remember reading, a whole essay on this subject, which is that the problem may not have been Rebecca's problem. The problem may have been Isaac's problem. And
maybe that's why Yitzchak was praying and not her.
Very good. Okay. So when it says that she was barren, it's another way of saying that maybe there was a problem with both of them, okay, or with her alone. Notwithstanding that, the scene is, the time lapse is 20 years, 40 to 60. And so what the verse doesn't tell us here, what we kind of have to read into the verse or interpret out of the verse, is that there's quite a long time. And that if the whole goal of the marriage, let's face it, was to continue on with Abraham, it's deeply, deeply frustrating. And this is the pain that they are experiencing. And I would go as far as to say, this is the trauma in this marriage. The trauma in this marriage is that they can't have children. And time is ticking away. And yeah, they know that Sarah, had a child when she was 90, but, are they going to do a do-over of Sarah? And Rebecca is, presumably a younger woman. Isaac is 40 to 60. I mean, it's in our terms, it's kind of old to begin your parenthood, but we all know that anything is possible. But the point is that there are 20 years that go by for childlessness. We get, when we read this very quickly, we get the impression that he simply prays when she becomes pregnant. But from when does he start praying? He prays from the entire time, and the text compresses the time. It's a different type of barrenness story from that of Abraham and Sarah. We have to go back and see what Abraham does to beseech God for a son. If you recall, Abraham, Isaac here entreats God. It doesn't say to us what Isaac says to God, okay? But when God talks to Abraham, listen to what Abraham says in order to have a child. Don't forget that Abraham is beyond 75 years old at the time, and he's childless still. So after these events, which means after Abraham, came to Canaan, then went down to Egypt, then went back to Canaan, God said to Abraham in a vision, "Be not afraid. I'm delivering a shield to you. I'm a delivering shield to you. Your reward is exceedingly great." Avram said, "My Lord God, what would you give me? For I'm going to die cursed, and the son domestic of my house, Damascus Eliezer." In other words, I don't have anybody. The only heir I have legally is my servant. You've given me zero, nothing. Okay? That's not entreating. That's kind of yelling. All right. Avram said, "Here, to me you've given seed. Hen li lo natata zara, my son must be my heir." And God's word, "V'nei dvar Adonai elav lemor, lo yirash hazeh." This one's not going to be your heir, right? Rather, the one that goes out from your body, he shall be your heir. He brought him outside, pray, look to the heaven, count your stars. Are you able to count them? He said to them, "So shall your seed be." In other words, what we often like to say is like the stories line up because, well, Sarah is barren, Rebecca is barren. Isaac entreats God, and Abraham entreats God. But it's actually not a one-to-one correspondence. Sarah's a much older woman, Rebecca's a much younger woman. Isaac entreats, but it doesn't say anything. Abraham really is, quite angry. Isaac is younger than his father was. Isaac is 60. Abraham is now older than 75. And Abraham won't be 100. He will be 100 when a child is born to him. So Abraham still has a lot to go. So there's the sense of urgency is very, very palpable for both. It's urgency with a little bit of anger and bitterness and defiance with Abraham, and it doesn't come across that way with Isaac, unless you disagree. Okay. Let's do one more verse here, or two. All right. So what's the response? She became pregnant, Vatahar Rivka Ishto, but we don't get a report of their reaction. In other words, we don't have the scene of her, looking at the pregnancy test and going, "Oh my God, I'm pregnant." We don't have that scene. We just get the report that she is pregnant, and that already places us in that new phase. Then the next verse, and we shift again. The Torah doesn't indulge us in their reaction. The Torah takes us right into the pregnancy and when in the pregnancy would this have happened, and what would she have experienced? Okay, she up until now, she doesn't know that she has twins. She knows she's pregnant. I assume she knows she's pregnant the way that women know they're pregnant, okay, which is that she stops having a period, right? And she feels pain, but she doesn't know that there are twins there. Vayitrotzetzu abanim bikirba, vatomer im ken lama ze anochi, vatelech lidrosh et Adonai. So here, the text is doing a little bit of a trick on us, because we know that there are twins there. She doesn't know that there are twins there. But it also doesn't tell us what she's experiencing in terms of pain, except that she says, "Lama ze anochi," why do I exist? Which is a way for her to say, I'm really having a difficult time. And then she goes to seek God. So very interesting now in terms of the contrast. It's he prays, Isaac prays, and she gets on, she takes a journey, okay? Now the text doesn't tell us where she goes, but I'd put this question here: how would we do this cinematographically, right? We focus on Isaac, and we see that Isaac is davening in the back of his, tent, but Vatelech, she's got to go, which means she leaves the tent and she's going somewhere. Now, where is she going? Well, who knows? So we'll see.
Could she go back to the field that Isaac used to pray in?
Very nice. That's far away, but very nice. Look, she can go anywhere. Listen to what Ibn Ezra says.
She wanted privacy.
She goes al yedei navi, to either a prophet, like there's a local person who's a wise prophet, or Avraham be'atzmo. She goes to her father-in-law. This, I thought, was beautiful because he's been off the scene forever, okay? But Ibn Ezra he's either getting this from another source or he's inventing this himself. He's saying, who would you go to? Okay, kilomet, he's not dead yet. Her sons were 15 years of age. Abraham was 175. Okay, if you do the math, you see that there's 15 years to go between the birth and the pregnancy and the death of Abraham. So he's saying something that's just plausible. What's plausible here is she's going to her father-in-law, okay? And why it makes such a beautiful story. It's not, the text, it's a stretch, okay? Let's admit this, all right? But it's a lovely stretch because it's trying to create another story here. And then the other story here is that it's trying to create the relationship between the desolate mother who really has nobody, her own entourage, we don't know where they are. When you're a woman and you are pregnant, you want a mother around, right? You want someone who's been there, right? Or at the very least, you want your mother-in-law around. I mean, and you want someone who has experience. Okay, I could turn to people here and say, yeah, that's quite a possibility. You want someone with experience. Well, she has nobody. Sarah's already dead. She has no. Where is she going to go? So Abraham becomes a likely suspect in the sense that if we give him the character of the benevolent prophet, wise person, but it's not, there's nowhere in the text that we have that, except for the fact that he's still alive. Nanette, you have a question.
Did I unmute?
Yeah, go ahead. You're on mute. Unmute yourself again.
Okay. Is it inappropriate, Rabbi, for me to be thinking that, hey, throughout all the parshas, there are so many characters, so many women pray to Hashem, oh, I need a baby, I need some help. I mean, I can't help thinking about Hannah. She prayed, she went to the temple to pray for the baby. There are so many other women, men too, that pray for the child. I mean, I can't help thinking about this. Should I not be thinking about this?
No, this is the Bible. The Bible makes you think that there are certain patterns that are repeating themselves all over all the time, and we're making these connections all the time to make comparisons and contrasts between these characters. You can start off with Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, the three matriarchs. They're all barren, and then you go to Hannah. And certainly there are other people. I think the wife of Samson is also barren, and these are common motifs. This is a literary motif in the Bible, precisely because these situations require some kind of intervention, and they are a crisis for the people going through them, as they are to this very day. Look, we certainly have had experiences of people that we know and people in the congregation and other people who, for one reason or another, have difficulty having children. It's one of these tragic tragic outcomes in and especially in our modern society. You know, what are the statistics, you know, good studies that are being done on fertility and infertility and declining fertility rates, etc. And for couples that want to have children, this is extraordinarily painful. And so what the Torah is doing here is taking us into the locus of a family in crisis. And a family in crisis is in extremis, you know, is going to resort to all sorts of behavior. They're going to be pressed into a certain kind of, you know, reaction that you know is part of who they are. I'll just give you one example of this, which is, you know, in next week's Parsha, I believe, or Jacob marries Rachel, and Rachel can't conceive, and she's so frustrated about it, and he reacts to her in a way that I think is quite unseemly. He yells at her, he's angry at her, you know, what's my fault, you know, that kind of thing. And just the same way you mentioned, Hannah, you know, is bereft with her inability to conceive, and she is placed in a situation where her co-wife, the second wife of her husband Elkanah, has got lots and lots of children, and she's quite jealous of this. And Elkanah, you know, when she's crying and says to Elkanah, I want, you know, this is what I want, he basically says, am I not good enough to you? Like, you know, many children, I'm not, you know, which is the dumbest thing that he could have said, you know. And so you see that everybody in a stressful situation can react in ways that are both predictable and also bad. Ilana.
Normally, a woman, when she's pregnant, she wants her own mother.
Yes.
Why did she go to Abraham instead of trying to have her mother come to stay with her? Or
Exactly. So the answer, I mean, I don't have a good answer. It's a bit, you know, this is all invention here, but you know, it's not as if you could get on a plane, you know, get on a camel and bring her. You know, you would think that there was, and of course there was communication. We know that the stories are built on the fact that the families communicate with each other. It's not that she was, you know, the mother would have been free to take care of her. I mean, I think that, you know, I mean, and here back to John and your point at the beginning, which is, yeah, in some ways she is a tragic figure. So I'm going to concede, you know, here I give you another point, which is she's tragic in the fact that the outcome in the end is tragic. She loses her son, and it's tragic that she's quite alone. That she, you know, we focus on the loss to Isaac. Isaac loses his mother, but she loses her mother and her father, basically. She may get a postcard from them from time to time, and she may be living the way that you know, all immigrants at the early 20th century lived, which is, you know, and we are related to some of these people. A lot of them came to the United States, they got on their boat, and they never saw their parents again, right? And we have to kind of get back into that frame of mind, which is, you know, if you say, I'll join you when I'm able to, and then a war comes and you're not able to join them, you'll never see them again. And that trepidation and that sense of loss is something that I think we simply don't understand. We get a tinge of it, okay? You know, we saying goodbye to our family members when on a visit, you know, there's always the assumption that, yeah, well, you know, see you next time, we'll see you next trip, blah, 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 blah. You know, nobody assumes that you're never going to see someone again, because, and even, I mean, you know, we have the experience of, you know, I have 2 kids in Israel, so it's not so simple. You got to get on a plane, but you get on a plane and you see them, okay? And you know that that's possible today. Well, you know, it's relatively recent in human history that is possible. When people left, and it was, you know, you were taking your future in your hands. And she is, in a sense, this an orphaned adult who has no father, no mother, and has a in Ibn Ezra's world, has a surrogate, and even then, it may not have been him at all. It may have been just an oracle or a prophet or whoever. Okay, all right.
And another example is Joseph and Jacob.
Joseph and Jacob again.
Nobody knew about the other one all these
Right.
years, and nobody tried to
Absolutely.
find out what is this.
What is it? It's he's the bereaved parent, and he is the ascendant. Has power, and he refrains from seeking his father. He refrains from sending whatever, a message when it was quite within his power, and that becomes a good question. Okay, we are over, but we so we had the beautiful moment that the infants are struggling inside, and I was going to bring up the well-known midrash of she walks besides Vodah Zarah and idol worship, and Esav wants to come out, and when she goes beside a place that is more pious, Jacob wants to come out. That's the struggle. It's a spiritual struggle, or the point is that these two are engaged in a conflict that already starts in their womb, and that's literally what's going on there. Okay, and that's it. That is basically, there's just one more point that I wanted to make. If you give me just another minute, we'll make this point, because this is there's reading closely, you get the sense that there's no symmetry. I'll give you one example. The text says, "Vayetzeh harishon," the first one came out. Okay, so if you say the first one came out, what would you expect for Jacob? The first one is a reference to Esav. How would you expect the text to refer to Jacob? It would say Vayetzeh hasheni, but it doesn't say Vayetzeh hasheni. It says Va'acharechen yatza achiv. So that little subtlety means that there's no symmetry in the text. And when the text doesn't give you symmetry, it means that the whole story is wobbly. And that's exactly what's going on here. There's a wobbly story here where one is favored and one is not. One is favored by one, and the other is favored by the other. I'll give you another example. Admoni kulo kader tse'ar. He's red and ruddy and hairy. But for Jacob, it says, Viado ochezet ba'akev Esav. His hand is holding on to the ankle, okay? How is Esav described? Esav is described by appearance. How is Jacob described? Jacob is described by action. Difference, okay? So you have another asymmetry here. You would think that they would both be described by appearance. Later on, we'll learn that Jacob is fair-skinned, but not here. Jacob is defined by what he does. Lastly, Vayikru shemo Esav, they call him Esav, and it's Vayikra shemo Yaakov, he calls him Yaakov. Who are they and who is he? Well, he is probably Yitzchak, okay, because it's a male, it's a masculine. He called him Yaakov. If it was his mother, it would be Vatikra Shmo Yaakov. She would have called him Yaakov. So he's calling him Yaakov. Vaikru Shmo Esav means it's possible that both of them decided on his name, or it's possible that people around, and that's the ambiguity. People were startled to see such an irregularly looking infant who is so full of hair and so ruddy that that's what everybody called him, okay? Vayikra, this is more normal. And so what we have here, just in one verse, we have here contained here so much information and ambiguity and possibilities of interpretation, okay? And lastly, I didn't get a chance to put this out. The notion of love. He Yitzchak vayehav Yitzchak et Esav, Berivka ohevet. She loves him, and there's a continuous thing.
There is a past and a present.
Exactly. And not only that, but there's a reason given for Isaac's love of Esau, which is he likes venison, but there's no reason that is given for Rebecca's love for Jacob. And that only brings you to a question, which is, well, why, what did she love about him? And then, of course, it makes us ask the question, is that a good thing at all? Of course, it's not a good thing that one parent loves one child more than the other. And should they not have known that? How could they not have known it? And to a certain extent, the book of Bereshit is wrestling with that question altogether. But I'll leave it there for now, unless you have any final questions, comments, observations. Anybody? Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, so I know how much you really like imagination. And
Yes.
I heard a Rabbi Twersky give one of the most fantastical descriptions based on Chaim Vital and the Arizal, who said that this was really a rectification of Adam, Chaya, and the serpent, and that their Gigulim were reincarnated into Esau being the serpent, Rivka being Chaya, and Adam going into Yaakov. And so therefore, just as the serpent tricked, Rivka also was tricking. And so that this was a way of rectifying the original sin, if you will, with the apple. And there are all these discussions that they go into. If you need several glasses of wine to get into this. But even the whole question of why did he like the food that Esau brought was that it was shechted by Yaakov. And so there was a holiness within that as well. And actually Rivka was in on that, because otherwise, why would he, as a tzaddik, why would he not even see these sorts of things in his own son? Because he was praying, etc. So the imagination is amazing in terms of God's hand working through the generations, according to this explanation.
Right. Well, look, these allegorical interpretations or more mystical interpretations, do have an agenda, which is to layer on the text a whole theosophy, a whole realm of thinking, and what you're talking about there is later generations coming to fix the flaws that happen earlier on, which is I mean maybe one of the ideas, Kabbalistic ideas that they're it's the Kabbalistic idea is that nothing happens by accident. So you can take that idea and almost make anything line up. I'll just give you one example. This is why I don't go for it, because it relies, it's imaginative, okay, but it's also there's a little bit of magical thinking, and it reminds me of how we talk about gematria. Gematria is like you can use the text to come up with all sorts of the letters equal certain numbers, and you add the numbers, and you can make all sorts of interpretations based on that. And the truth is, once you start, the sky's the limit with that. You can go do anything with it, and especially it's very manipulative because you can make almost anything equal anything. And so aside from the technique of it, the real question interpretively is, well, what are they trying to say here? And what they're trying to say here, I think, at the very core is nothing is an accident. Everything, and that cycles of story are always present. And that's not a mystical idea. That's also a Jungian idea. That's also a Freudian idea. That's also a deep cultural idea. So there's a lot of ways that we can connect these things without kind of setting them aside altogether. I'm being generous here. That's what I'm saying. Okay. All right, everyone. Toda rabah. It's always great. We'll see you. Let's say tomorrow we're going to Washington, so I have no class tomorrow. All right.
A safe trip, Rabbi.
We can do a class from the bus.
So you said you sent out one email that said there may be a link to have a live stream. Is that going to happen?
I saw that today, and we'll see it. I think on C-SPAN they're going to broadcast it. So So
Thank you.
I'll have to see.
Safe
I'm gonna...
travels.
Safe
All right,
travel.
take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Go safely.